Hello, and welcome to ISI Insiders, the flagship podcast of microbiology, which is sponsoring this episode in the form of the flu that I think I might be turning the corner on. But rather than turn to 11 labs or have an AI atom and beautiful filters, we're here to embrace biology and all that it means when it intersects with the human. And that means you get to listen to me sound like I was in Vegas all weekend, when in fact the only gambling I've been doing recently is about how much acetaminophen my liver can actually take. So here we are on the ISI Insiders, where we get a chance to go inside of ISI, the famed and now 50-year-old Information Sciences Institute, to meet some ISI insiders. And these are the folks from across the Institute, and I get to talk to them to better understand their what, their how, and their why. That is, what they're doing, how they came to be doing it, and perhaps most importantly, why. With their ability to go anywhere else, why are they here? Why are they working on this? Why are they working on it right now? And, dear listener, why you might care. Hello, I'm Adam Russell. I'm the director of the AI division at University of Southern California's Information Sciences Institute, or ISI, and I'm your podcast host. I'm serving as your virtual guide as we talk to some of these ISI insiders, all to test my hypothesis that by better understanding this, by better humanizing the people who are doing the actual work that we hear about in the media, that appear as names on publications or conference talks, well, we might get a better sense of where things may be headed, or at least where these folks think we might be headed, as well as, and this is very important to me, where they think we should go and how we might get there. So my guest today, who I think is sufficiently quarantined from me so I don't have to worry about getting him sick, is Mr. David Balenson. Mr. Balenson is currently a senior supervising computer scientist and the director of the Networking and Cybersecurity Division at USC's ISI. So a fellow division director, in fact. It's an opportunity for me to talk director. David's been Johns Hopkins, McAfee, Sparta, Trust Information Systems, National Institutes of Standards and Technology, near and dear to my heart, having just served there myself, also known as NIST. Gosh, with that, Dave, I think I've set expectations high enough. Welcome to ISI Insiders.
Well, thank you, Adam. It's a pleasure to be here. I'm really looking forward to this conversation.
And we will see if you feel that way when we're done. One of the things we like to start with on ISI Insiders is what we call the origin story. You're in networking and cybersecurity. You've done at least half a dozen stops on to where you are now. How would you sort of explain sort of how you got started and sort of what you're doing today, particularly with a focus on, like, let's say, go back in time and talk to your 12-year-old self. Tell 12-year-old David, what are you doing today and how'd you get there?
So the way I usually explain what I do to folks is real simple. I play with computers and I try to make them secure so people don't misuse or abuse them. So I actually got my start in this when I was a youngster. My mom got me a book by an author named Herbert Zim on codes and secret writing. It's just this small little, I still have it. It's, now yellowed. It was a yellow cover, and now the pages are yellowed as well because of sun and time. But it talked about ciphers. It talked about cryptograms. I loved the part with secret writing, with lemon juice. You write in lemon juice and then you put it underneath over the flame or under the light bulb, and in the lemon juice, the secret writing appears. And as a result of that, when I was a student at the University of Maryland, College Park, in computer science, when I was doing projects and taking special topics classes, I gravitated towards cryptography. And that in turn led me to a professor, Harold Edmondson. When he saw my interest, he directed me to, you mentioned earlier that I got my start at NIST, that you actually work with NIST. So he directed me to NIST, which at the time was actually still the National Bureau of Standards. So I was there when it was still NBS and when we converted from NBS to NIST. And that pretty much is what got me started in my entire career.
So your 12-year-old self would not be entirely surprised to hear that you're still working in this area of this alternate language, this coding, and frankly, these machines that can do amazing things for us, but think in very different ways and can also enable bad things if we're not careful. Your 12-year-old self would get that, or would be sort of like, wow, that's a pop quiz.
No, I think he would understand exactly where I am and how I got here.
All right. Well, That's one 12-year-old who will be satisfied. That said, the world is very interesting now, and I'm not going to sit there and let you try to explain to your 12-year-old self how he got here, the world as a whole. I would be interested in talking to your 12-year-old self about why the work you do now is so important, right? I mean, you would think like that we've been with computers long enough that we understand networks, and frankly, cybersecurity has been a topic for so long. The 12-year-old David, I think, could be forgiven for thinking, why isn't it a solved problem? Why is this still an issue that we have to work on?
Well, one way I describe this is I feel like we've done this headlong dive into the deep end of the sea of technology. Technology, cyber technology now controls everything in our lives. Unfortunately, if something happens to it, if it gets hacked, if it goes down, if the power goes out, then we're at the point now where we're not able to do anything. You can't buy a Slurpee at 7-Eleven. You can't get soap and water dispensed at the sink at the airport. You name it. Everything's now cyber controlled. Everything's cyber physical systems. Everything's Internet of Things. And we saw last year, the Microsoft CrowdStrike update took out major systems at hotels, airports. It was a major disruption. And so I think that we have an over reliance on technology and we lack the resilience that we need in order to be able to trust and depend on this technology. And so we have to work really hard to make sure that there's security designed in and that ultimately the technology is resilient and that we can trust it and depend on it.
So, Dave, looking at your CV, I noticed that you have worked on automotive security, which makes you feel better so that I don't have to worry about the cars rising up and taking over because of you. I'm also sure I wildly misunderstood what automotive security means. So, could you unpack that a little bit and tell us actually what you're doing there and your thoughts?
This has actually been one of my passions. I started working on automotive security when I was supporting Department of Homeland Security Science and Technology Directorate, and that's continued for quite some time now. I've probably been working on it for close to 10 years. The way I net it out is cars have just become computers on wheels. Computers can be hacked, so of course our cars can be hacked. Furthermore, our cars are becoming more and more networked and interconnected. And that means that lots of data can be collected and they can be accessed remotely. And all that needs to be secured. So there's a big emphasis on not just security, but also on safety and on privacy. And the fact is, you can't have either safety or privacy unless things are cyber secure in the first place. So the good news is, since the first automotive hacks were introduced just over 10 years ago, industry's made great improvements. Researchers and engineers alike have worked to figure out ways to secure cyber in our cars, trucks, and other vehicles. There's still a long way to go. Of course, we have a lot of electric vehicles, electric vehicle charging stations, which introduce new threats. So we've got to figure out how to protect against that. And AI and autonomous vehicles also introduce new threats and other challenges. So we've come a long way. We've made good progress, but we still have a long way to go to make sure that these autonomous vehicles that are driving us around are safe and secure and maintain our privacy.
Well, I mean, as someone who likes to really rock out to like 1980s while driving, and I still try to sing Aha's Take on Me, which I shouldn't because there's no way I can reach that pitch. And I may every now and then sing along with a little Taylor Swift. I certainly value the privacy. Yeah, I know. God forbid the world should learn that. Let me ask you this: if someone, a younger person, and we have students at ISI, for example, and USC, a younger person comes to you and sort of says, I kind of want to do what you do, right? I think what you do is really important. What would be your advice to that person? What should they study, or how should they think? What research should they do? Or alternatively, just like what kind of a person do you think some degree of curiosity should they cultivate? Do you have any suggestions for a younger person who wants to be a Dave Balenson when they grow up?
Read Herbert Sim's book on codes
So,
and secret codes
love
and
it.
secret writing. So obviously, explore, be inquisitive, learn about science, use it to study the world, question everything. To get into the cybersecurity field, you need to think somewhat adversarially. So
Hmm.
don't just think about, what happens when everything works properly the way it was originally intended or imagined to work, but think what would happen if and when something happens. So when something breaks, when someone actually tries to attack it and hack it to
Hmm.
take advantage, how would you protect against that? Or more importantly, how would you design or build that system from the beginning to make sure that it's inherently trustworthy and reliable and won't necessarily succumb to either errors, mistakes, or active attacks?
Right. How do you, one of the biggest challenges in something like AI safety, for example, or cybersecurity is when you do everything right, nothing happens. Right. So you have to sort of prove that because we did our job, nothing bad happened. How do you prove a negative in your experience? How do you address that question?
Yeah, well, that's part of the point of bringing
Hmm.
more of the scientific rigor into the process. So, instead of just a constant cat and mouse game of I'm going to attack something, someone else is going to protect it, I'm going to attack their protections, and then they're going to add another layer of protection, and over time the system just becomes layer upon layer. It becomes increasingly complex, and now you've got all these different layers, the interfaces between the layers, they become a target, and you've just built something that eventually it's like a house of cards that crumbles under its own weight. And you need to really be more thoughtful, more formal, and build the security in from the beginning, and try to build it as simply as you possibly can. In some ways, less is more.
Yeah, more robust. When you talk about security, you have this really interesting dynamic, though, between again the networks, the technology, but also the sort of humans that are using, in some cases, abusing or misusing the technology. That suggests to me that cybersecurity, your work at Sphere and other places, is sort of inherently multidisciplinary. Like you can't just leave it to the computer scientists. You actually need other disciplines to have input and engagement. Has that been your experience that you've worked with multidisciplinary teams?
Absolutely critical that we have multidisciplinary teams. In fact, I think that's one of the challenges that we face in the community and with the systems that we have, because too often they're designed by computer scientists and engineers,
Mm.
and they don't necessarily have sociologists and human factors and others involved as part of the team. And you really need to think about how all of these systems are going to be integrated into our lives, how they're going to be used by various people. And unfortunately, they often tend to not be very easy to use. That makes it even harder to secure them. You often hear the expression that users are the weakest link, but I honestly think the problem, the challenge is we need to design them in such a way that the humans can be
Mm.
fallible and the systems won't fall apart.
Science wants to be open, as they say in software. Many eyes make every bug shallow. How do you balance this need to be open so we can make progress against cybersecurity and network security challenges, but not so open that we're actually almost making ourselves more vulnerable? And it's not just you personally. I'm just curious from the perspective of cybersecurity. How's that balance sort of maintained?
Yeah, so there's different people in different parts of the government who look at this from different perspectives. I've been fortunate that I've worked most of my career in the open research world, and I'm a big proponent of everything being open and accessible for peer review. There are requirements that when you find a new vulnerability, you need to disclose that first, and you need to provide whoever is developing that system the opportunity to patch it, because like you said, you're potentially creating an opening for the hackers, for the attackers. But ultimately, I think the way we collectively become more secure is by being aware of exactly how vulnerable these systems are and how critical it is to address these kinds of vulnerabilities, to patch them in the current systems, and to figure out how we prevent them from happening in future systems as we move forward.
Yeah, and in your community, is that sort of an ethos that has emerged or evolved like in the community, or was that sort of a top-down thing that says, thou shalt report these things, thou shalt do, the following things when you discover a vulnerability, or have you found it's more like you? There's lots of Dave Balensons out there who believe that like ultimately we are more secure collectively if we have this sort of norm and these sort of mores.
Yeah, for the most part, I think the academic research community that
Hmm.
I've aligned with and worked with believes in being open because that's how you bring these things to the light of day, where the sun can shine on them and, kill them like bacteria.
Yeah.
And there hasn't really been a top-down pronouncement, but I think they've sort of recognized the importance on their own that you need to have a process for responsible disclosure.
Okay. I'm curious about you reflecting a little bit on like lessons from that community, your community, for things like AI safety, right? As these AI models become more capable, agents are now released into the system. What can folks in AI take from what you have learned and helped build, frankly, in the cybersecurity and network security area? What should we be paying attention to?
Yeah, it's a good question as well. My experience, what I've seen is that there's a rush to develop AI techniques, machine
Mm,
learning models, a rush to publish them, and then others come around and figure out ways to poke holes in them. And again, there's a similar cat and mouse game like what I described earlier for the cybersecurity community. And what I think really needs to be done is designers and developers of these AI techniques and of these machine learning models need to think adversarially from the beginning. And how do we design security? How do we design safety? How do we design reliability into them from the
mm.
beginning and build them with that in mind? Because it's a whole heck of a lot harder to patch them later once they've been designed without that.
Amen. Especially if you're building systems that some seriously take the prospect of them being smarter than we are in the near future, right? That's hard. That's even harder. Yeah, no, that's well taken, Dave. It sounds like you sort of live, breathe, and eat cybersecurity and network security, cryptography. Do you have any other hobbies though that you do that you think have contributed in some way to how you think about this stuff and the work you do?
So yes, I do have other hobbies. Have they contributed to my work in cybersecurity? So not directly. They give me respite and
Mhm.
peace, happiness, and
Right.
serenity. So they get me out of the rat race, so to speak, of cybersecurity. The thing I enjoy doing the most outside of my work is I actually collect sand from around the world. So I have a collection of over 350 sand samples from various beaches and riverbanks and deserts and mountains and you name it, all around the world. And a lot of people just think, oh, sand. But when you actually put everything next to each other, you see the absolute beauty and variety in all the different sand samples. And then when you think about, where the sand came from and how long it's been around, it's pretty amazing. In a way, a single grain of sand, captures billions of years of Earth's geology and history.
And if you could just tell us, if you just tell us what to see. I'm also assuming with all that sand around, you don't have cats. I'm kidding. So Dave, I think we're running out of time. Really appreciate the time you've taken out of your very busy day, sort of securing the world, stealing at sand. I'm kidding. Borrowing at sand. We're only borrowing stuff anyway. The sand will be here far after we're gone. But also, sharing your expertise and words of wisdom with us. So thanks, Dave. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you, Adam. I've enjoyed it as well, and always enjoy chatting with you.
Awesome. All right. Well, if you enjoy these short podcasts, please do what really only you can do, or at least we only want you to because you've actually listened to this and that's informative. Please rate us, score us, evaluate us, grade us, subscribe, spread the word, send us feedback, offer brave questions, and of course, please keep listening and learning. And join us, please, again for another episode of ISI Insiders, where we'll keep exploring, keep learning, and keep humanizing tech. to help us navigate our way through this weird world, trying to do what humans can do best when they face these kinds of challenges, working together as if all our lives depend on each other, because they do. So for now, for the future, fight on.